correctly or I won't start.
Go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Continuous Discussions, the online forum where we talk about Agile, DevOps, and continuous delivery. I'm Sam Fell.
And I'm Anders Wallgren. Today's topic is DevSecOps, very hot these days. In software delivery, security is often treated as an afterthought and a bottleneck. You know, sprinkle some security on it at the end. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it shouldn't be that way. So join us today as we're going to talk about how DevSecOps helps teams shift left, build security and quality into the process by making everyone responsible for security at every stage. And we'll talk about a few things like, why DevSecOps, what are the barriers we're trying to overcome to get to DevSecOps, and what, patterns, processes, anti-patterns, anti-processes, all of those kinds of fun things. And as always, we have an awesome set of panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anders. So I'm going to introduce you guys. Feel free to expound and expand upon the introduction. A man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyways, our friend Alan Schimmel. Welcome back to the program, Alan.
You're muted.
Who is muted?
Alan, you're muted.
Yeah. So we'll move on while he's figuring
I'm
out.
unmuted. Sam,
There he is. Okay. Hi, Alan.
Hey, everyone. Looking forward to our topic.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you for expanding and expounding. Cheng-Xi Wang, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And Derek Weeks, welcome back. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Love the crowd here.
Very good. And last but not least, Paula Thrasher and Geetika. Introduce yourselves, please.
Sure. So Paula Thrasher, we got the new GDIT, and I brought my counterpart.
Geetika Tandon. I'm also with the new GDIT, working with Paula on the Federal Civilian CTO group.
Wonderful. Well, we're pleased to have you. Always nice to see new faces who are passionate about Agile, DevOps, and continuous delivery. And today we're really talking about DevSecOps. And there's been blog posts around get over it, it's only a name. What does it really mean? Let's talk a little bit about why people should even worry about or think about DevSecOps. And I'm going to start with our buddy Derek Weeks. Derek, take it away.
Yeah, it's well, DevSecOps, I've been talking to a lot of people lately, and some of the people that haven't been following the progress of some of the leaders in the community kind of think that it's a buzzword, that people are talking about it more than they're actually doing it. And I think that as Alan and Cheng-Xi and Paula saw when we were at RSA a couple of weeks ago, there are a lot of organizations that were there talking about their progress and their journey toward DevSecOps and improving those practices. And we've seen that. I think, Alan, this was our 4th year doing the DevOps and security track at RSA. So I think that those that are kind of non-believers out there that DevOps and security can integrate with each other and integrate successfully at scale, where you have organizations of a couple hundred or even a couple thousand people that have a DevSecOps practice in place that are continuously improving it, adding in automated security is important. So it's definitely gone beyond buzzword status. I think we're a couple of years truly beyond that, and I think that was very apparent from some of the things like RSA a couple of weeks ago.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the clarion call for a lot of these conversations are every time you look at the newspaper or every time you turn on the TV and you see how these security vulnerabilities are manifesting themselves in, not just in some arbitrary theoretical place, but with your own social security number or with your own television in your living room. And so when you make it personal, I think for people, they're starting to pay more attention. This is really, really important stuff, making sure that you're baking that security in.
Yeah.
So why DevSecOps? Because, go ahead, Derek.
I think where it's most important, I think it was maybe a week or two ago, it was Saturday morning. I was reading up on industry news and I saw this article in CSO magazine, and it basically just started the story with, hey, if you have a pacemaker by, I think it was Abbott Laboratories, you need to go immediately to your physician and get that thing reprogrammed because of security vulnerabilities in, in these connected environments where it's a medical device. And I immediately thought about my friend Mark, who I know has a pacemaker, not Mark Miller, another Mark, for those of you that know Mark Miller. But I immediately thought, like, here's an area where, one, we have to be better about the quality and security of software we're making, because it's not just, oh my gosh, yeah, my credit card got hacked or my bank got hacked. But when it's a pacemaker, that's a whole different story. That's a
you don't want to brick that thing when you update it.
Different game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's also even in critical infrastructure, right? So we think about critical infrastructure as older, more archaic systems, but I've been hearing those industries adopting DevOps in certain applications that they built anew, like a power plant, I know in San Diego, is giving their consumers a web interface to view their usage and things like that. And that's built in the sort of microservice kind of architecture, but they have to reach into the back end to get information from the actual system, right? There are a lot of integration points that they're still trying to figure out, and security is extremely important there.
Yeah.
So guys, I'd like to chime in here if I can, Sam.
Please.
Imagine that. But I think the critical thing we need to think about when we talk about DevSecOps is not whether or not security is important. I think you'd have to be living under a rock somewhere, even if you don't read CSO magazines on Saturday morning, Derek. I'm sorry. I usually don't. I have better things to do Saturday, but I read CSO magazine. But the important thing is not that security is important. The important thing is how does it integrate? Where does it fit into this kind of new paradigm of DevOps and microservices and containers and agile and lean and all of these things? How do we better integrate security? Or should we? Should there be a DevSecOps? There's not a DevQAOps. There's not a DevOps or something like that. Why DevSecOps? Are the security people special? Right? That's not it. And I will tell you, I as Derek mentioned, we've been fighting this battle for 4 years. I don't know what to name the thing we do at RSA. One year we called it rugged DevOps, right? Gene and Josh Corman spoke. It was rugged DevOps. Then we named it SecOps, then DevSecOps. Here's the important thing. DevOps is DevOps, right? It's not just about Dev and Ops, though. It's about the whole stack, the whole organization, adopting a common cultural way of interacting, including security, and bringing security into that culture, into that software automation assembly line, if we can, right? And that means we talk about things like shift left. We talk about, these types of things. But really, that's what DevOps is DevOps. We add the second there. Go ahead, Anders.
I agree with that. I long for the day when, there's no such, we don't distinguish between security and quality, because yes, there are different disciplines to them in some extent, but, as far as the end user is concerned, a bug is a bug. Now, if that bug exposes my credit card number, or if that bug gives me 100 times the amount of radiation I'm supposed to get during my treatment, the outcomes are both bad. And I don't, I long for the day where we just think of both as quality, or both as, pick a new name. I don't care what we name it. But, the idea that we should segregate security off as, it's different than quality. It's a measurement problem. It's a frequency of measurement problem. It's a depth of measurement problem. And there are operational issues to be sure that we need to worry about. But, in this wild new future that we envision, someday we'll just think of them all as quality problems. And kind of treat them accordingly, which I'm not trying to simplify or say DevSecOps is not
I think that's maybe a nirvana, but I think we're kind of far from it right now. And Alan asked the question, is security special? Have you talked to a security guy lately?
Yeah, well, no, hey, Chenzi, and you know this because Chenzi and I are Facebook friends and we kind of run with the same circles there. There are people who say it should be SecDevOps because after all, isn't security most important? Or we should have SecOps, but it definitely needs to have security first. And then we have other friends in the security space who say, hogwash, it's marketing. But truthfully, I will admit it right here live on C9D9 that I went with the term DevSecOps and agreed to call what we do around it because security people do want to feel special. And if that's what it takes to bring them into the fold, I'll do it. Yeah. I'm married 28 years. I've learned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to give a perspective. We've heard from, at least I've heard when I talk to CIOs in our national security sector, they go, oh, yeah, I want DevSecOps. And I say, well, why do you think you need DevSecOps and not just DevOps? I'm kind of curious why they're throwing that word out. And I had someone describe it to me as, well, my developers automate stuff and my infrastructure people are starting to automate stuff. My security people, they're still using paper. I'm worried about them. I mean, that's a cultural challenge that security hasn't been necessarily an integrated part of a lot of the DevOps transformations. And so I think it exists because either I think both ways, either we've left them out or they've stayed outside this transformation that's happened.
Weren't necessarily invited to the party. Yeah.
Right.
So to add to that, I think I echo everyone here, along with the fact that I think of it as common sense. I don't even understand how security has been left out. I don't even understand. We do all these huge pipelines. We're releasing like 100 code releases a day, and then boom, we're stopped. We're stopping for
we
scanning.
totally forgot about security. I'm sorry. Oh my God.
You left your kid at home? Oh my God. Yeah.
But to be honest, it's easy to say, right? It's easy to say, oh, security should be part of the process. But it's in practice, it's difficult to do. When you have a security testing process that takes days to complete from the input to the output, right? And then you've got people are releasing 500 releases a day, say, those two are very different culture. And you cannot just say, oh, security, go integrate. It doesn't work, right? So you have to find the right way, the right insertion points for security to come in. And I've been actually studying a few organizations, how they do it. And it's fascinating to me where people begin and how they increasingly find different insertion points where security gets integrated. And it's not as easy as it sounds like, oh, you find one, you integrate and you're done, and find the next one. It's usually an iteration process, but it takes a lot of team communication, a lot of sitting down, figuring things out for security to be part of it. And so it's not an easy process.
I'm encouraged, kind of that you say that, because we had the same substitute the word quality or testing for security in what you just said. And we had that very same conversation 5 years ago, right? We're trying to figure out how to fit quality in. Mm-hmm. Some of the quality things we do take days. They're difficult to do, yada, yada, yada. And we haven't solved that problem by any means, but we've gotten a lot better at it, I would assert. So I think the fact that we're even having that conversation is a good thing. Because now we can talk about, why does it take several days? It shouldn't. Can we parallelize it? Can we make it faster?
Right.
We can do all of the above, but you know what, Anders, that doesn't address the cultural aspect. It addresses, could we do a better job at testing? Yeah. Let me tell you why I see it.
Let me just clarify a little bit. I mean, I think the cultural aspect of that is bring the security people in to the fold.
Yes.
And say, look, you're frustrated by the fact that this takes 2 days. Let's see if we can parallelize it. Let's see if we can make it faster. Let's treat that as.
People aren't frustrated by that. The security people will run a test as long as they want. I'm sorry, Chenzi, go ahead.
Yes, but then, so the security people have to make certain concessions at some point, right? Yes. So the concession meaning that maybe we'll do minimum tests for now and we'll push it out. We'll continue to test, continue to monitor in production. And I think being able to hook into production and detect fast and recover rapidly and having real-time feedback loop is going to give security a lot more tools to play with than they had before. So ultimately, it's a good thing, right? But security has to get comfortable with it.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned before that I think was very insightful was that you have to be able to incrementally improve. There wasn't a twist lock before, and now there is. And so I have to be able to adapt that pipeline to insert the tools that I need to in a way that's not going to completely upset the apple cart for everybody else. It's not going to require more, it's not going to be more onerous for the operations guys. They're just going to get another checkbox that says, yes, we went through the standard security and compliance pipeline. We've added this tool to it. Now you're done.
So
the MVPs.
What?
Yeah, minimum viable pipeline.
MVP, to get it out and then continuously improve.
Exactly. So what's the security MVP, right? So look at the minimum set of functions or minimum set of tasks you have to do for it to come out, for it to push out of the other side of the tool chain, but having it done as automatically as part of the tool chain is important. I was just having this discussion on Twitter this morning with some of the Chrome security teams, and they were saying that they have this tool chain. Then what happens is in the middle of the chain, they draw boundaries of certain tasks along security tasks and say, this is security task, that's security task. And then the code chugs along down the tool chain. And when it hits the boundary of security task, it automatically triggers security task. But the security task itself is minimal, is agile, is done automatically. And then when it's done, it goes this way or that way. It's all automatic, right? So, and that's where we have to figure out where the minimum boundary is. And that's a difficult thing to do in the beginning. So.
Yeah. I would say one other thing, though, Andres, to your point. So I remember when we first launched DevOps.com about 4.5 or so years ago, 4+ years. And we had a lot of articles that were around the thing, is QA dead? Will DevOps kill the QA star? Does DevOps mean that QA people lose their jobs? And when we look at the resistance to automated testing and better quality in a DevOps sort of software delivery pipeline, that was culturally what was kind of, stuck in the craw of our QA folks. With security, we don't see that. No one's ever saying security's dead or there'll be less security jobs, right? In security and DevSecOps, the cultural fight is a little bit more of a different fight. It's how do we take these people who for so long have been classified as other, right? Don't have a seat at the table, they're not even part of the IT team, they're with risk management, right? And at the same time, how do we now say, oh no, you guys, you just sit right here next to me. You're part of the team. You're one of us. Because, it's like raising a kid, and many of us here are parents. You raise a kid and he grows up as an other. He relishes being other, right? And he doesn't feel part of the team. So how do we make him feel part of the team? And at the same time, their job function shifts fundamentally from being the gatekeeper and person who says no to being the enabler who says yes, and make sure that everyone else on that team who's not a security person is on board with, hey, security's all of our responsibility. Derek, I know you guys have done a lot of this at Sonatype over the years with a lot of the surveys and stuff. You've, ask developers what they think, security people what they think. Fundamentally, guys, that's the knot that we need to untie.
So I would add to that. I would say I was talking to a client recently, and what they mentioned they've started doing is making it part of the childhood. Your user stories are designed for security. They have security-based user stories that need to be fulfilled. That's very simple. That's a very simple way, simple way of adding that security aspect to the beginning. not just doing your scans, but making it part of the design, making it part of your architecture, making it part of your thought process. And that can only happen, Alan, like you said, if you make them sit at the table and make them part of the design process. So I think that will change things a lot in a different way.
Yeah, I think especially when we've all kind of mentioned the cultural transformation aspect of DevSecOps. The culture is certainly one part of it, but I think even at the earliest stages of that, it's the organizational transformation that dev and sec and ops, or DevOps and security sit in different silos. They sit in different buildings. They sit, in different teams. And the people that are really doing this well have figured out how to get those people to sit next to each other, to work within the same teams, to sit right across the table from one another. So, before you kind of go through and tackle the cultural, the cultural barriers within all this, people have to be in the same room, and people have sharing those stories and those experiences, and creating while hacking, right alongside one another, I think is an important aspect of the journey. But it shouldn't be undersold as just cultural transformation, because the org chart matters.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've had completely kind of diametrically opposite experiences with a couple of our customers. And in one case, they reseated everybody when they reorganized teams. And so quite literally, the firewall person, the network person, this person, that person, everybody was sitting around the table, literally working with each other, versus, kind of the diametric opposite. And these are both in the finance space, these companies, where it was, basically they're on different continents. So, trying to collaborate, trying to learn from each other. The velocity is low, the friction is high, low, right? The trust is low.
The alignment. Back to what Geetika says, it's all about that user story. It's all about that alignment.
Yeah.
Right. What are you trying to solve for? And how can I, instead of what are you going to ask me to do to try and help solve it, versus, like Alan said, what can I do to help you solve that problem? We're on the same team. If this ship's, I think it was Craig Hinckley from White Hat Security was talking about the fact that this DevSecOps, the security concerns are slowing down the speed of transformation for companies. And because they can't figure out how to bake that security in, it's slowing down their ability to ship, it's slowing down their ability to transform, which of course is impeding their ability to compete. And so when you start to think about it from that perspective, it's really important that all these teams are on the same page, that they all have the same goal. Otherwise, you won't be in business, and it will be a moot point.
Yeah, and I think if we talk about
one thing I want to ask is for the companies that desire to do this, right? So security and ops and devs roll the same direction in the same boat and actually act like it. Do they have top-down mandate, or is this a grassroots effort? I really want to understand that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's neither, sometimes it's one, sometimes, I mean, in my experience, in terms of the customers that we've worked with, it's, I would say it's more top down than it used to be, at least in terms of support and leadership. It was very much a grassroots effort, a few years ago, along with DevOps and kind of Agile in some ways as well. But yeah, I'd say we're getting a little bit better about that.
Paula, what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I was going to say at the tactical level on the team, one of the challenges that I see happen a lot is, I'm just talking about the tools. I mean, it's awesome that there's a lot of tools. There's scanning tools. There's, tools that do real-time monitoring. There's all sorts of things you can do for security. But one of the things I see happen is, okay, so we're going to, run a security scanning tool. What happens? The first thing that happens is the team gets like 4,000 hits. It lights up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And so to the developers, they're like, well, that's useless. I have 4,000 user stories to work on. Forget it, right? And they're out of there.
Even 12 years.
It's so overwhelming that it might as well be nothing, right? So what the challenge is that, I mean, and it's funny, we had a team that built a full microservice. It was running on Amazon Lambda and Amazon Kinesis, so no servers. One of the security controls is to prove that you patch the servers within 24 hours of it's like, there's no operating system. What are we patching?
Yeah.
We can ignore that one and let's focus on the things that are actually risks to this specific system and not the cultural approach, which is I must complete my full checklist. And it's the same thing when you run a tool and you get a scan and you get 4,000 hits. All 4,000 of whatever it is, all of them are not important. They're all probably bad. They probably should all get fixed eventually. But when you meet people where they are you collaborating on figuring out what you're going to do with this laundry list you got?
Right.
Because you're going to get it. I mean, that's reality.
Yeah. So to add to that, actually, I've seen that happen in a situation where we were about to go to production. Of course, it was not DevSecOps, it was DevOps with security towards the end. And we got these 4,000 hits and we had to go to production. Most of them were ignored. So are we really securing our system? We are making our system even more insecure by doing that.
But guys, I got to tell you, so
right.
Hey, get Jen.
That's the failure of both teams, where we've been preaching this for years. Is if you wait to do security at the end, you're just asking for it, right? Both sides are asking for it, and so the going back to the earlier discussion is really figure out what's the MVP of the minimum unit of security you need to do as part of the tool chain, and where do you insert those in? And I think this could be a really, really interesting study to do on various organizations, how they figure it out. And Paula, you guys do it. You guys do it here and there for different, maybe different companies that you work with. I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of specifically. Do they start with scanning? Do they start with I don't know? For instance, United Health Group is doing chaos engineering for security, right? They started with a small number of applications. When I sort of heard about this, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. You guys are doing chaos engineering for security. That's like far off into the future already, but they're doing it. So what are the first a few things people start to do? Do they start with scanning? Is it vulnerability scanning, or do they start with that like dynamic testing?
So we're moving on now. I just want to, because you guys, this conversation is going really well. We just sort of covered some of the common barriers that we needed to overcome, and now we're sort of starting to go into the next topic. So apparently you guys are right on track. So so Changxi, your question's perfect, Rachel, and Paula. Maybe you and Geetika can comment on what are some of these patterns that you're seeing and where are people starting.
Sure. I mean, I'm meeting with a customer later this week where we're there's a little bit of DevOps going on, and they realize they need more security going in to the pipeline. And so what we're starting with, the easiest thing to start with is scanning at the code level, right? Because putting a scanning tool in place less than a week, you're going to get the Christmas tree lights up, and you got to deal with that cultural impact. If you're going to find stuff, what are you going to do about it? But that's easy, and it's instant feedback loop for the developers. The next thing as you get more mature in scanning the code, you're going to also want to try to scan the artifacts and the other things in your environment. I mean, that's another area where you're scanning not just the stuff you wrote, but the COTS. And we've got a lot of customers that it's a black box in the COTS. You got in her space, right. A lot of COTS.
Right.
We have a little less of that in the national security sector because most people.
And not just COTS are these days. Open source.
Right.
Yeah, it's huge, right? Everywhere.
Not the issue. Guys, can I make a comment though? Putting in a security control that you've got to patch your server within 24 hours when you're hosting it on an Amazon cloud or something where you have no ability to patch below the OS or below the application is not a question of getting a better scanner or a better tool. That's classic shift security left, all the way left to the requirements and architecture phase of things, right? That should not be a security. There's not a tool alive that's going to help you with that.
Right. That's where Geetika's suggestion about the user, sometimes people call that user abuser stories, where you're writing the security story. Put the security requirements in the backlog. Don't show up at the end and
and guys,
the easiest thing doesn't take any tool at all.
Yep. Right. The idea of vulnerability scans, so I was selling vulnerability scanning and management in 2002 through 2010. and we sold it to government as well as large enterprise private. This is a classic security problem, not a DevOps problem. Vulnerability management tools, we used to think they were the bad news generators, but they were also, it was a great job, like sort of like bridge painters, right? In New York, the Verrazano Bridge is a very long bridge.
Right.
The guy starts the day after New Year's on the Brooklyn side of it. He finishes on the Staten Island side right before Christmas, takes the week off, and then starts again day after New Year's on the Brooklyn side. That's how vulnerability management works, right? For years, we've tried to say, hey, we need a better tool that prioritizes vulnerabilities. I don't want to know about a Linux vulnerability on a Windows system or what port that I'm not using anyway. These kinds of things. The security industry needs to get better about that. That's right. That's not a DevOps or the developer's problem. That falls on us as security people to make better, right? If we want people to take security seriously, you can't walk in a clown outfit with big shoes and give someone a telephone book to say, hey, memorize this, right? That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So,
but I'm picturing you now in a clown outfit
and big shoes.
So this is a win for me.
Yeah, all good. It's all good.
So I have hope, right? So I work with some of the very innovative, in the cloud native new companies here in the Bay Area, and some of them their development operations or platform engineering process is so advanced in terms of the current state of the industry goes that I look at what they do and I'm like, wow, that's the future, right? And so there's this one company, I'm not going to mention the name, but they have one platform engineering team which takes the platform, they engineer certain abstractions on top so that the development team doesn't have to worry about, really the platform specific details. And they give those controls to development. And guess what? Development ops are one team. There's no DevOps. They call it what I forgot the name, but it's not DevOps. It's just developers who have operational responsibility and also knowledge, right? And developers on call for this company, right? And they are responsible for end-to-end because they were given the right level of controls. They don't have to worry about operating system. They don't have to worry about anything that below a certain level that the platform engineering team has done. And they don't have a central ops, right? So you're responsible for your own application. And that is a great model. They were like, oh yeah, we discover things that if we discover bug, next 30 minutes is fixed and new update is pushed onto the server because the developers end-to-end and because developers were empowered and enabled. So, I get inspired looking at, teams like this. And I think we will move to that mode of operation. It takes a while for maybe more traditional organizations.
Have ownership.
Yeah, have ownership, yes.
What are your thoughts?
We're all talking.
One of the patterns that I've seen out there, a couple of different patterns. One is kind of when I talk about getting a seat at the table, it doesn't always have to mean in the same room. So I spent some time last week with a guy, Franklin Mosley, who's an application security pro at PagerDuty. They have a DevOps team at PagerDuty. And the DevOps team, actually, most of the dev team sits in San Francisco and he sits in Dallas. But by background, he's a developer. So when he's coming to the table, understanding as the security pro for their team, I understand being a developer, if you throw up, 1,000 red lights or come with 1,000 pages, a binder full of vulnerabilities, as I think he said, right, then you know that you're not going to get the attention or respect or empathy of the development team to work along with you. So kind of understanding the patterns and the knowledge, and there are organizations like Fannie Mae as well who build their security team within DevOps from developers. They don't hire security people to be their security team within DevOps, they say, we're going to train developers to be better security people and have that person be the kind of the security pro within the team. So in terms of a pattern that works, where you create the right empathy and the right, cultural pattern, if you will, to embed it, that's one way to achieve it. The other patterns that I saw, I think Alan mentioned, are DevSecOps community survey. So what we've seen over the years that we've been running this is, one, security is being automated into the lifecycle. It's being automated further left into the lifecycle, especially when you compare non-DevOps organizations with mature DevOps organizations. It's dramatically different in the levels of automation. But as Chensi mentioned, kind of what are people starting with? And when we ask people, one, where are you automating security? And then we said, what are you automating? In the top 3 automation things, first was WAF, was automated security. Second was container security. Third was open source governance. And then fourth, it was like static, dynamic, and some other things. But we didn't ask why. Why did you start with this? And of those top 3, we didn't say, what did you start with first? But it was just, kind of out of the things that you've implemented, here are the things that we've started with.
Yeah. I don't think we've talked yet about sort of the notion of the supply chain of software, right? I mean, if you're a restaurant and you're cooking food, you want to make sure that the romaine lettuce you're serving in your Caesar salad has just the right amount of E. coli and no more. We don't do that as much in the software industry, right? And no shade on Sonatype, but the vast majority of people, as far as I know, still do unencrypted downloads from Maven Central, right? So there's man in the middle just waiting to happen there. And at some point we got to think about this in terms of what's the bill of materials, what's out there, what's been quote unquote recalled, and how do we kind of fix that? So once things are in production, you can't stop. Obviously, you need to keep going, and that that kind of goes back to the sort of statistics about where are most of the exploits coming from, and the vast majority of them, as I understand it, are coming from well-known, long-standing security issues that have been out there for a long time, or long by technology standards. And a lot of it is just simple stuff that we need to do better.
I think Equifax was one of our poster childs last year on the open source vulnerabilities thing. But the same survey, I just brought up the slides on the survey. So open source related breaches up, 31% of the survey responses, up 55% year over year. And we also saw 1 out of 3 organizations had a breach due to web application vulnerabilities. Right. And so I think what we all know, and we see in the news every day, is there's another breach, there's another breach, there's another vulnerability, and we have to do something about it. And I don't think the question is, can we build secure software? I think we know we can build secure software, but part of the I think we can if we put the right practices around it. Yeah, absolutely.
I think we can build secure software. I'm not sure.
It's constantly it's an arms race that's going to continue to go, and that's why you have to be, as Chensi, you mentioned earlier, you have to be able to adapt that pipeline to accommodate all the new niche tools that you're like, why would anyone in the right mind have created this tool? And then a year later, you're like, how did we live without a tool like this to protect us from all these nefarious things that are out there? And the other thing that I think that Derek, that I'm going to key in on what you said, and it goes back to what Geetika said about the stories, is that training the developers to have that empathy and to understand what they're trying to achieve. It's not just about having the cleanest code. It's not just about it's about thinking, how is someone going to exploit what I'm doing right now in a way that I haven't even tried to think about? What is I think, Paula, you were talking about the SQL injection, but now it's with REST services, right? You've got these API endpoints. So maybe you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I would say from a training standpoint is, so I don't really, I don't know what other large organizations, it's pretty hard to find what I call sort of the unicorns, which is the security person who codes, the coder who's like awesome at security. Like that's not reality. So you kind of have to, how do you create a team that as a team functions with all those skills? That's really what you're trying to do. So one of the things I do on my team, so, Geetika and I both work for our respective CTOs, and I've got about 50 folks that work for me, and we're doing, projects for the different customers in our group. And so when we do something, if we do it bad times 5 customers. So we care a lot about security. So one of the things that we do is we have, so folks call it mob programming sometimes, where we'll broadcast something in the conference room. We bring in developers. I bring in infrastructure people. I bring a security person. We actually put the code up on the screen and we go through the fix. We're going to fix the defect. We're going to write a test. We're going to run it live. We hand off who's at the keyboard. The first couple of times we did it, I mean, my hardware people were probably the most grumpy. They were like, code, is it going to be Python? They were like, okay, if it's Python, but that looks like JavaScript. I don't know. And the security folks were equally like, they were mostly there, I think, because they thought they were going to catch us doing something bad. But that, so at first folks were like, I don't code, but actually having them part of the process of watching the developers fix the issue helped them understand what the root issue was, right? And so then we could talk about it's not the SQL injection, it's security between components. We could talk about, we had an example where we were making an API call to a third party, not us. How are we going to secure that? How are we going to handle man in the middle? How are we going to handle, so you've got a hardware engineer, a security engineer, and a developer in the room thinking about how we're going to handle the security vulnerability that's created by us reaching out to a third party. Much better answer than just giving that to the developer or giving it to the security person to put the no stamp on. So that's a good strategy.
Right. It's by definition a multidisciplinary problem, right? It's, it's like user experience, right? It's not just code, it's not just hardware.
Yeah, it's an hour a week. It's a code review, right? We take a pull request. We take a snarly issue. It's not a big commitment, but in that hour, everybody's getting trained. And by the way, we're getting stuff done.
Yeah. So add to your her story, Apollo's story, and to the E. coli story, what we saw was, okay, if we know there is E. coli in the lettuce, and how do we assure that there's just the right amount? So what one client has come up with, and nothing major, it's really simplistic. If you think of it, they said that they put in a flag for check-ins so that when a developer does run a vulnerability check, and just so they don't overpass everything, another developer has to overlook that check, and then that flag is set, and then they can check the code in. So it was just an oversight on top of one developer on top of another developer, and that's when the code is checked in. So it's just a simple flag they added, and they felt like the code quality and the checks were much better, and the security was much better.
I think sometimes it's just, but it's about automation, right? It's not about someone say, oh, I've done this, now you look at it. That doesn't work. And so another company that I looked at their process, similar things. What they have is, in the container world, they have what they call Brown's registry, right? So they have code that's written by the or assembled by development team, and then goes into a Brown's registry. And no other code can into Brown's registry unless it's from their own team. Then from that Brown's registry, it's automatically security team goes in and scan it. And then only those that pass scan gets put into what they call a gold registry. And from there, then they could deploy to the server, right? No other code can be deployed to the server unless it's from that gold registry. But these all like automatically tied together. So it's, just like you setting a flag, it's the system constraint is set automatically. So you can actually do things without worrying about somebody making a mistake.
Hey, Alan, can you unmute yourself and say something?
I thought I was in the penalty box 2 minutes for high sticking or something. No. I figured I must have done something wrong again.
No, it's 4 minutes because you drew blood.
Yeah, no, it was an automated mute. This is the problem with this automation stuff. But anyway, no, I have to agree with a lot of what Derek had mentioned with this stuff, and it's an interesting conundrum or place that we are in here as an industry. Let me tell you what I think is really interesting, though. Here is we have Electric Cloud, which we don't traditionally think of as a security company, per se, right? CD, ARA, all of these things. We have General Dynamics, IT, and Paula, I know Paula a couple of years now. Not traditionally a security person, but a security person nevertheless. Electric Cloud. Sonatype, which really, has their roots in security. Chenzi is a longtime security person. But the fact that we are having a discussion, not just the security folks versus the dev or ops or DevOps folks, but we're discussing this as a group. That to me is really a key thing. It's progress, guys. That's progress. We had 850 some odd people show up to RSA DevSecOps days this year. And it wasn't all developers. There were a lot. It wasn't all security folks. A lot of developers in there. That's progress. And you're not going to boil the ocean or change the world in a day, but we will change the world, and we will change the way software is delivered so that security is synonymous with quality. And I think the fact that we're here is proof of that, right? And the people who are here. Just also wanted to.
So I have a question.
Good.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, sir.
I have a question for Derek. So do you think that we'll get to a point where it's just back to DevOps again, where DevSecOps will be an unnecessary inclusion in that moniker?
I'm kind of looking forward to the day of whatever the thing is beyond DevOps versus whether we go from DevOps to DevSecOps and back to DevOps.
Surely DevOps is the end of history. Come on.
Right.
Dude, I can't get too many more domains.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Maybe in my career lifetime it'll stay as DevOps, but something else is coming, and I think that we'll all prepare for that. But I think while I mentioned at the beginning that DevSecOps is real, it's working at scale in big organizations. It's not just simply a buzzword. I think there's a lot of progress that still needs to be made with different teams that I talk to in places. I was just talking to someone in Europe at a big telco the other week, and they were saying, we're working with development. I'm on the security team. We're working with development. We're getting closer, and we have all these. We're a big regulated organization, so we have all these rules and things that that developers need to follow, and we've been working with getting them to follow them more. And I said, that's really cool. Are any of those rules or policies instrumented as code? And he kind of responded cross-eyed, like, what? Code?
Right.
And it was, the binder's full of vulnerabilities, or here's the policy, go and implement it. And I just thought, oh man.
We were talking to a customer. I said, well, how do you do your deployments? And they said, oh, they're scripted. I said, oh, great, okay. Where do you run them? And he said, well, they're scripts. I'm like, okay, yeah, where do you run them? And when he said script, he meant like Hollywood scripts, like. Bob does this, Joe does that, right? So just complete misunderstanding, and we lost each other for 5 minutes till I figured out what he meant.
Yeah. So there is still progress to be made. So I don't think we're going to get off the terms anytime soon, but we're early in the wave.
Yeah.
But I think it would be great. I think DevOps is a fine term. I should stay with it, unless there's compelling reason to change. But I love it for us to see a day where DevOps is DevOps and it's secure by design, right? There's no reason to do DevSecOps or security for DevOps or whatnot. It's DevOps secure by design, which is what I love to see.
Yeah.
You know, I think on that point, and I've been harping on this a lot lately, secure by design becomes law in the European Union in 24 days.
Yes.
And if you're not paying attention and you haven't looked at GDPR, right, this is important. Secure by design is Article 25 in that thing. And I think a lot of people are looking at this at it as, oh, keep my information private because I went on your website and registered for something and, it's privacy. Let me tell you, the first time that you get breached, someone's going to say, I'm going to interpret your lack of cyber preparedness as not secure by design. You're getting fined by the European Union for that. And that interpretation, we're 24 days away. It is not some far out kind of thing. This is EU law.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, I have a prediction.
Is that what you said? You? I agree. That's you.
Yeah,
Totally
thanks
agree
for
with
all the viewers that we have in Europe that are now tuning off.
Yeah, I know.
You.
I have a prediction on what I think that's gonna change, or what I hope it changes. We talked a lot about the building secure things. You know what we haven't talked about yet? Responding to the incident.
Yeah.
And the first time, we had a great, I told a little bit of the story at RSA, but we had a team that did, great DevOps deployment. And then we had a security incident and the SOC called us and, hey, and it was like the first time we're like, who are you?
What do you want?
What are you?
No, thank you. Click.
Right?
No, I don't want any security vulnerability.
I gave it the office.
How often does that happen though? Does your SOC, so here's a question. Does your SOC and your ops team and your developers, do they practice? Do they rehearse together?
It's like backup and restore, right? Nobody ever tries to make sure the restores work.
And possibly that you did something for your disaster recovery, whatever, but did you do your security incident recovery testing? And less people do that. And that's hugely valuable. And actually, the people that need to practice most usually actually aren't the security people. They're used to responding to security issues. It's the ops and the developers who aren't used to responding to security incidents, and they aren't equipped, they aren't trained on how to respond. And so when your vulnerability happens, it's a bad news story. So I think there's an ops side too. We've been talking about the dev and the scanning and fixing dev, but we shouldn't forget the other side, which is operating these systems.
Or response by design.
Right. Like where did the E. coli get shipped to? Which burritos is it in? Right. So that we can figure out that, and this is horrible, but I'm going to say it anyways, that blast radius from those burritos.
Okay. No. This is a little too much.
We've crossed over.
Yeah. Don't worry, it's not live. Oh, wait.
Now we've lost the European and the U.S. audience.
But I think, Paula, your point is extremely valid in that, we can't forget the ops part of the equation. We talked about scanning and how to fit into the tool chain, but what happens in operations, right? So DevOps is all about real-time feedback loop, getting just-in-time metrics, understanding what's going on. And with microservices, the security visibility actually gets more complex, right? So you kind of, traditionally, you might be able to see this application talking to that application, but now there are thousands of components talking to each other, and you may not have all the visibility. So what do you do, right? How do you tap into operations? And there's actually a very interesting very emerging trend that I'm watching. It's called SOC-less enterprise. So they are organizations that are doing security detection and response in a very sophisticated way. They don't have centralized SOC, right? So what they do is they have real-time metrics feedback to the dev and ops team, and they manage it automatically to the extent they can, or maybe a little bit manual work attached to it, but they don't rely on a centralized SOC to detect things. And I thought extremely interesting. I don't know if it will be a major trend, but think about it. You don't rely on a separate team to do these security incident monitoring response for you. You do it as part of your process, right? That's, to me, is awesome. Again, so it's part of yeah.
I mean, in some ways, it comes down to a simple question, right? Which is, and I'm oversimplifying the simple question a little bit, but but you know, you have a vulnerability. It's fixed in a later version of the third-party library that you use. Doesn't matter if it's a bug or a security thing or whatever, but how long does it take you to re-roll that and run it through the pipeline and get it into production, right? And that's really, in some ways, what it comes down to when you have an incident. There's lots of other stuff, obviously, but fundamentally, if your goal is to patch that, what is your lead time and cycle time on doing something like that? And that's where, you know, oftentimes, you know, that lead time for some people is years, and for others, it's, you know, it's minutes.
So let me be the pessimist in the group here, because, you know, we have an ability to look at downloads of certain open source components before and after vulnerabilities are discovered. And I presented some of this at RSA as well. When you look at something like the struts vulnerability that was related to Equifax, you know, we had about 100,000 downloads a month of vulnerable struts components that we saw in March of 2017 when the vulnerability was announced. That dropped to around 85,000 on a monthly basis. So we kind of saw a 15% drop in the consumption of these vulnerable components. But by November of last year, between March and November, by November, it was back up to around 100,000 vulnerable downloads a month from thousands of organizations around the world. So, you know, whereas you're talking about, hey, how fast is your, you know, remediation of, you know, putting the right version in place, 85% to, you know, more of organizations downloading this stuff aren't even paying attention to what they're downloading in the first place.
Right.
So the idea that you're actually finding it in your production environment,
fixing it, right? It's the Chipotle thing. Yeah, Chipotle again. Yeah. Well, hey, where do you want to go for lunch? Well, let's go to Chipotle.
I don't mean this seriously, Derek. But how about you just delete those old bad versions of struts and stop people from downloading them? I don't mean that completely seriously, but seriously,
go and Google LeftPad or npm gate. And see what happens when you remove a component from an open source warehouse. Development stops very quickly.
Yes, breaks all the
thousands of organizations. The system is not set up for that kind of reaction.
Yeah, no, clearly not. But I think I mean it's interesting, right? Because the bad lettuce with the E. coli is still on the shelf in your store. Well, not your store, but you know, in the store. At some point, we got to get that out of stock,
right?
You know, and go back out and buy it.
Yeah, at some point though, when you go to the grocery store, you know, and you pull stuff off the shelf, and there's a recall, you know, the beef recall, right? Like you have to go in your refrigerator and actually check, like, hey, I heard there was a recall. I use that brand. Maybe I should check, you know, the serial number. And it's up to me because I went to the grocery store. It's not the grocery store only that has to pull that off the shelf. And the way software development works, because you know, really what's pulling these things from the central warehouses where they sit is not humans. It's your automated tooling that says pull you know, this version of Struts Core or jQuery or whatever off the shelf. It's automated, you know, automation that's making those pulls, not humans. So when the automation is making the pulls, the automation should also help with the automated checks of those things that are entering your software supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. But Safeway probably does know that I bought that bad beef, right? Because I punch in my number so I get my discount. You know, maybe they could give me a little heads up. You know, hey, maybe don't cook that batch. You know,
right, with the new refrigerators, you're going to get that alarm.
Yeah.
That you buy that bread
you know what? Hey,
when you get that pan with auto sensor in it, it will refuse to cook that beef.
There you go.
No, but, you know, you guys laugh. I just got a new refrigerator because we're redoing our house, and it's a smart refrigerator, and it asked as you put in food. It wants you to enter what food you're putting in, and it gives you shelf life and everything on it. So it may not be as far off as you think.
I got a Bluetooth.
Seems like a
I
lot
just
of
got 2 weeks ago a Bluetooth
Or a
connected
thing
refrigerator,
refrigerator
and I did not connect the thing. It is not. There is no net. It comes with network connectivity. There's no way I am connecting my refrigerator to the internet.
No one's going to know how many
cold.
times I eat the ice cream right out of the container. Yeah. Well,
Automation is the solution to all the problems.
that's right.
Hey guys,
DevSecOps.
before we wrap, can we mention DevSecOps Days in London coming up?
Absolutely. I have two things to mention before we wrap up. So the first one is we're doing if you want to learn more about DevSecOps, there are two events happening just a month and a half from now, right after the DevOps Enterprise Summit with Gene Kim and IT Revolution and the rest of the gang. We are working with John Willis on a workshop, a technical hands-on workshop where you actually get to build your own pipeline with vulnerable code, deploy it, find out how horrible that makes you feel, and then incrementally fix it, exactly what Cheng-Xi was talking about. So we're going to be running that right after the DOES show in the UK, as well as the one in the US. So look for that. And then right after our workshop, Sonatype and Alan and John Willis are going to be doing DevSecOps Days London. Derek, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is really, it's, Sonatype's involved only as a sponsor, but there is a community of folks over in London. Mark Cluett, who runs DevOps or the DevOps meetup there, Helen Beale at Ranger 4, and a number of other people are organizing DevSecOps Days, very similar in structure to DevOps Days, but focused on this topic. So it's a community-led, community-organized event. We're simply one of the organizations helping to promote it. We just ran that first one in San Francisco in conjunction with RSA. There's another one in Singapore in July. You can find more at devsecopsdays.com. And there's a lot of information there, including podcasts, articles, and so forth.
Very good. And Electric Cloud is also very happy to be sponsoring that as well. So come out and join us for the hands-on workshop. You build it, you secure it, or come and join us at the DevSecOps Days London. Super excited to have all of you guys join us. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks everybody for listening in. It's very important to have good hygiene when it comes to your software because your lives may depend on it as we get more and more of these things into your life and woven into the fabric of your life. Software is super important, so take it seriously. Thanks everybody. See you later. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sam.